Hi everyone, welcome back. Today's palette review is going to be on the brand new Suva Beauty Saffron palette. This review will have my thoughts as well as 5 looks and swatches. I'm just going to read off of the card that came with the palette to give you a little bit of background on the Saffron collection. I am only covering the palette in this, but there are 2 lipsticks and 2 hydroliners as well. The Saffron collection is inspired by the colorful Fijian childhood of Suva Beauty's founder and CEO, Shayna Azad. Enormous family gatherings every week, chai time with aunties who always spilled the tea, and being the headlining gossip in a family that extends as far as your sister's best friend's grandmother's daughter-in-law. So memories of her childhood became inspirations for the Indian shade names in Hindi for the color story for this collection. To talk a little bit about the packaging, this is my preferred kind of package for a palette. I like cardboard because it keeps it really slim and compact. So the outer packaging print does match the colors that you're getting on the inside, which is fantastic. There's nothing I hate more than a misleading palette packaging, but you are getting pretty much the exact same colors that you see there, you're getting them on the inside. There is, of course, a mirror up top. It's one of those flimsy mirrors though, so it won't stay wherever you put it. You'll have to prop it up if you're going to be using the mirror. The back of the packaging does indicate that this is made in the PRC, which is China. The Saffron palette retails for 42 Canadian or 35 US, and that's really impressive because you're also getting 1.8 grams of product per eyeshadow in here. I always point out that 1.5 grams is a typical eyeshadow size, so that's usually what I judge other products against. This has more than that, even though the pans actually look like your regular 1.5 gram product pan, but you are getting a little bit more, and that could be just because the formula is a little bit denser on some of these. I'm going to slide in some swatches now so you can see exactly how these shadows look like on my arm. Alright, now that you've seen the swatches, let's talk a little bit about the colors in here because I find them so exciting. When I first saw this palette previewed on maybe Instagram, I was so drawn to it. The colors in here are really, really exciting to me, primarily because there's not only one red shade, but there's actually 2. And usually in an eyeshadow palette, if a brand is going to throw in a red, they're going to give you 1. And that kind of frustrates me because while I love red eyeshadow, you usually need colors that are going to help that color out. You can't just toss one color in and be like, well, there you got your red. So I like how this has that really bright paprika red. That one is fire. Like, it is so vibrant. But the other color you might not necessarily think is a red is actually one, and that's cinnamon up here. Now, looking at it on the viewfinder, I see that it comes across as more of a warm brown, and that's how I saw it too when I first opened this palette. But in practice, it actually goes on the eyes as a much deeper red in comparison to paprika. I don't see as much brown in that color as the pan portrays. It really does come across more as a red, which made me really happy because then I could use the 2 together to blend things out, and it was so pretty. Of course, some people are going to look at that color and actually want that true to pan color. You're not quite getting that. You're getting some aspect of that, but it's more of a red color, to me anyway. So paprika and cinnamon are matte shades and they blend beautifully, but you've also got one other matte, and that's the clove shade down here. That's obviously a darker brown, and it's funny because it actually looks a bit cool toned in comparison to the rest of these shades. I didn't think it was going to work that well trying to blend out the reds because it's cool toned, but it worked out really well. I always ended up putting that on the inner corner of my eye to deepen things up, and while it's not very dark in this look, it did really work to bring some dimension and depth to that outer corner, which is something I always like in an eyeshadow look. If I can't deepen up that outer corner area, I really don't like how my makeup looks, and this color does work really well for that, and it worked with every single color in here. There was not a shade that this thing would not help blend into a deep color, so I really liked that. Now, I'd said there was only 3 mattes, but I guess ginger pretty much functions as one. It's more of a satin color, but it does go on fairly matte. I mean, I tend to think of satins and mattes as pretty much the same thing. There's just like a hint of a sheen on a satin as far as I'm concerned in comparison to a matte. I use this on my brow bone all the time. It's a great color. It blended out anything that was in my crease very seamlessly, and it does match my skin tone, so I really like that. In general, I felt like the mattes blended out pretty much perfectly. The only one that I felt had a little bit of skipping would have been paprika, but it wasn't like really destructive to a look. You just had to spend a little bit more time kind of buffing it into place, and it turned out perfectly fine. It just required a little bit more work than the other mattes in here. You will notice that they're kind of missing that medium mid-tone brown shade that most people use as a transition color. I feel like that would have actually helped this palette out, but I don't know what shade I would have removed in order to put that one in there, because I did like these color combinations every time I use them. In the end, I ended up substituting the red colors for that crease color, and I loved it so much. I mean, I wear a lot of red in general, so it's not like it was much of a challenge for me to substitute the red in instead of a mid-tone brown, but it's not something that I would normally do every single day. And in the end, when I was doing the 5 different looks for this, I had to do it because there's no other real crease color, and I loved it. I loved it so much. Moving on to the shimmers in here, they are very smooth and very blendable. There's only one that's kind of chunky, and that would be Star Anise down here. That one surprised me so much. I didn't use it wet. It probably would work better wet, but when I put it on the lid the first time, it was transformative. I don't usually wear brown colors on my lid very often, and it is a paler brown with some sort of like gold flash to it, but it's not a color that I would normally gravitate towards putting on my lid. And the first time I did it, I think it was the first look I created, I was just like, this color is glorious. So I really like Star Anise, even though it was a little bit chunky, flaky. But the other are all more similar in terms of texture. This one's a chunker, but these ones are all very smooth and buttery and pigmented. I never used them wet, which was impressive because, like, look at that color payoff. I didn't have to dampen my brush in order to get that. It just went on like it was a foiled shadow. It's so freaking pretty. So Coriander up here is a gorgeous champagne pearlescent color, although I find the name coriander or cilantro very strange for that color because the actual leaf is green, but I guess if you're using dried coriander seeds, they're more like this kind of color. Anyway, this one worked great on the lid. You could also use it on the brow bone if you like something shimmery there. I really love turmeric. I have that on my lid today, and I think I use it on the inner corner of my eye in another look. Beautiful shade. I mean, I keep saying beautiful, but there's no bad color in here. I mean, saffron up here is equally gorgeous, and so is sarso down here. There is not a single bad eyeshadow in this palette, and they all work so well together. Okay, now that I've talked about the eyeshadows in depth, let's take a look at the 5 eye looks that I created using this palette. The first look uses Cinnamon through the crease, and this is when I discovered that cinnamon does have quite a red edge to it. You can apply it lightly so it does go a little bit more of a softer brown, but you still get like quite a bit of red punch to it. I used Star Anise on the lid. I used it dry here, and it was a little bit flaky to apply, but you can see that the color is gorgeous. It's so stunning. I used Clove on the outer corner of the eye just to deepen it up, and Ginger on the brow bone with Coriander on the inner corner of my eye. For look number 2, I used Paprika through the crease, and you can really see just how luminescent of a red that color is. So stunning. I put Saffron on the lid, which came out quite a bit more orange in comparison to Paprika, but that's just because I'm putting the two colors side by side so you can really see the difference in tones between them. I used Ginger on the brow bone and applied Coriander on the inner corner as well. For look number 3, I have Cinnamon through the crease and then Sarso on the lid. I put Clove on the outer corner of the eye, again to deepen it up, and then Turmeric on the inner corner as well as Ginger on the brow bone. So look number 4, I wanted to do something that was more day-to-day, I guess you could say, something a little bit more toned down because this whole palette is very vibrant, but there's gonna be some people who wanna do something a little bit less flashy. So I used Cinnamon through the crease, and if you apply a very light amount of pigment to this and then buff it, it actually turns into a very light peachy shade. I swear, that color is the most transformative in this entire palette. I then put Coriander on the lid. Love this color pretty much everywhere I put it. It's so gorgeous. It's such a basic color, and yet it's so stunning. I also have Clove on the outer corner of the eye and then put Ginger on the brow bone. For today's look, I put Paprika heavily through the crease, and you can see it skips a little bit here, but I just kept buffing it out and it was totally fine. I then put Cinnamon just below it and buffed that through the crease. I really wanted a bright red fade between my brow bone and my lid color. And then I put Turmeric on the lid. So pigmented. It was so smooth and buttery to apply there. I put Clove on the outer corner of the eye just to deepen it up a little bit, but I didn't want it to go brown like clove is. So I ended up layering a little bit more of cinnamon on top of it just to make it a little bit of a deeper cinnamon color, and it actually worked out really well. I then put a little bit of coriander on the inner corner of my eye just to fade out turmeric because I didn't want to put that bright yellow on the inner corner. I also have ginger on my brow bone. For my lower lash line, I used cinnamon on a small brush and just buffed that along my entire lower lash line. And then I used paprika to blend out the edges of cinnamon just because I really wanted this to be a hugely blown out red eye look. I think this eye look came together so well, and it's initially what I had planned when I first looked at this palette, but I wanted to save this look specifically for the video just to show you how impressive of an eye look you can really get out of this palette. Alright, so we've talked about the palette and the eyeshadows on the inside. You've seen my swatches as well as my 5 different eye looks using this palette, and I think you can guess how I feel about this thing. I think it's phenomenal. This is such a good palette, and I'm so impressed that there's only 9 shadows in here, and yet there's not a single one that feels out of place or doesn't work with the other colors. So I created 5 different eye looks with this palette, but I still see so many other potential combinations in here. And considering it's only 9 pans, that's impressive, because sometimes I can get a 12 pan eyeshadow palette and the combinations in there feel somewhat limiting at times. Like you feel like you create a few looks and those are good, so you're gonna stick with those. With this, I feel like I can blend any of these colors together and I'm gonna get something unique and special every single time. I love that the shadow quality is phenomenal. There's no duds in here, really. I mean, I complained about this being a little bit chunky, but you saw it on the lid. It looks glorious. I also think the price tag on this is phenomenal, like 42 Canadian or 35 US for 9 shadows that are all flawless. That's wonderful. I really loved Suva Beauty's Block Party palette, but I feel like this one just appeals to me on a more fundamental level. The colors in here are very much what I want to see in an eyeshadow palette. I mean, a lot of that is because of the reds, but all the other colors work so well with those reds that it just makes me so happy. There's only so many ways that I could keep saying how happy and how beautiful and pigmented this palette is, but it truly is a winner. And if you were interested in these based on the shadow colors, just know that the quality is equally good and you will have a good time putting color combinations together. So that's gonna be it for my Suva Beauty Saffron palette review. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
I'm alone, I'm a broken home. I gave you all the bricks that I own.